Ladies and gentlemen, my name is TotalBiscuit. I'm here to ask and answer one simple question. Who is deadliest? Good question. Chivalry Deadliest Warrior. This is the pre-alpha build, which I was able to play at PAX. This is direct feed with me playing. So, let's show you what's going on here. I'm going to play a little bit of Samurai, a little bit of Spartan, and I'll give you my impressions on the current state of it. Once again, not necessarily representative of the final product, because this is very much a pre-alpha. You probably recognize the map that actually came from the trailer. That is going to be modified later, as it turns out. And we will have a look at loadouts and things like that, and we'll talk just generally about the nature of the game and the fact that this thing even exists. But before that, a little bit of stabby, shall we? There we go. Alright, so Chivalry Deadliest Warrior is going to be a $15 expansion of sorts to the original Chivalry. It will give you access to, in total, at least on release, 5 different legendary warrior types. The two you'll see in this video and that have been announced are the Spartan and the Samurai. The one which has not been officially announced but is coming is the Knight, which leaves 2 more options, which could quite frankly be bloody anything at this stage, although I would strongly suggest that it probably isn't going to be the Taliban. Alright, stabby going on. So, what does it contain? Well, it's going to contain a few different modes, that we know, which includes kind of multi-faction modes and things like that, as well as a new set of weapons and fighting styles. One of the most important things to note about it is the fact that a lot of the weapons that are in here are not just simply reskins of existing Chivalry weapons, they actually have some of their own aspects to them that make them somewhat unique, and I will be able to demonstrate some of that. For instance, any katana-style weapon actually has an on-draw attack, meaning that once you select the weapon, as you flourish it to bring it out of its scabbard, or whatever you would like to call it, it will actually do damage in a cutting motion, assuming that you are close enough. I mean, it sounds a little bit kind of like a taunt move in something like TF2, but it is surprisingly effective considering, and it means you can do significant damage upon selecting that weapon. This matters quite a lot because the Samurai have a large amount of flexibility when it comes to their primary and secondary weapons. It can include a bow, as you will notice a little bit later on. It can also include things like large clubs, different sizes of katana, and of course a variety of different kind of Japanese spears. As it stands, the Samurai class in the pre-alpha is the most fleshed out with the largest weapon set. They did say that they're intending on putting more weapons in on the Spartan end of things, although as you will see in the loadout, that's currently rather limited, which makes a certain degree of historical accuracy, but I would imagine there will be some changes made in that respect. The guys at the booth were not very good at Chivalry, thankfully, so I was able to go on a little bit of a rampage here. Okay, so let me show you the loadout screen and we can have a look at exactly what's available here for the Samurai, and we'll try and have a look at the Spartan as well. As I mentioned earlier, the Samurai is the most fleshed out class at the moment in the pre-alpha. You are able to, at present, actually pick all of the weapons as either a primary or secondary, which means that as it stands, the Samurai is one of the most flexible classes in the game, and compared to Chivalry stuff is way more flexible than that even. As to whether or not it excels in any particular aspect, that's a little bit more difficult to say. The armor on a Samurai does appear to be significantly weaker. They do have no access to shields, so that's worth taking into consideration, although you do have a variety of different clubs, different length swords, as well as a couple of different spears. Speaking of spears, you've got 3 spear types for the Spartan right now. The shield comes with every single one of them by default. Just bear that one in mind. You also have 2 different types of swords. There are expected to be more types of weapons available for the Spartan and the other classes in the final version. These spears can also be thrown, and the shield is a key component of the actual fighting style. The shield seems extremely effective. It's a very large shield. You can block an awful lot with it, but it also becomes part of the weapon combo, which is a little bit unusual. That said, if you don't use the shield properly, you can be very easily disemboweled, as demonstrated, and that is not particularly pleasant. The Spartan has the ability to throw his spear. Admittedly, that means that you don't have it anymore, which is a little bit unfortunate, although it can do an absolutely massive amount of damage, assuming that you properly aim it. You also have the ability to use the shield as part of your combo. You can actually do kind of a 3-hit combo with it. You can attack with the shield, as you can see, and that does a significant amount of damage as well, so that's not too bad. We'll have a little more look at the Spartan in the next section of this. We're going to go on to a different map. There were 2 available in this pre-alpha, stabby over the head there. One of the best moves, actually, with the Spartan is the ability to kind of keep your shield in a reasonable spot, which would be difficult to do damage to you in, and kind of stab over the top of it, which could be pretty effective. Let's go back to the samurai for the time being, shall we? I'm going to get out one of the larger clubs here, absolutely massive two-handed thing, and I will see how that one goes. Also picked a shorter version of the katana, whose name I cannot pronounce. I believe it's like Wazakashi, Wakaza. I'm not even going to start. It's probably a terrible idea. Yes, I'm calling it the Weed Whacker. What can I say? A little bit of a warm-up here as we try this one out. I'm interested to see just how the asymmetry works. At the moment, in this particular version of the deathmatch, you can actually grab whichever class you please. I imagine there's going to be some faction-related stuff, which is kind of Spartans versus Samurai, or Pirates, or whatever it is that they're going to do, and that could be rather interesting, to say the least. As it stands, though, the different factions act like separate classes entirely, although they do have somewhat more flexibility to them. The samurai being able to take a bow as well as pretty much everything else does make the samurai the most flexible class we have seen up to this point. I don't know if they will allow that to continue to be the case, because it does seem like it might be maybe just a little bit too overpowered, but it's hard to say at this particular stage, of course. The Spartan is way more limited, and it's kind of obvious as to the kind of fighting style that you would use as a Spartan, in a similar way to the kind of fighting style you would use, say, a man-at-arms or a vanguard or something along those lines. They all have their very specific trademark fighting styles, whereas the samurai, well, aside from the ability to draw your sword and actually disembowel somebody with it, can kind of do everything. Samurai running around with that gigantic club is kind of ridiculous, even though it is a little bit historically accurate. Just going to try to get the beating stick on him. There we go. That seemed to work pretty well. I'm intrigued to see how they pull off the rest of them, because aside from aesthetics and the obvious preference for which kind of weapons you like from which time period, it may be that there's significant overlap. Admittedly, that is also something that's Chivalry is very much guilty of, I've got to say. You do have classes that can use kind of similar weapons. You don't necessarily have to use a shield with a knight, and as a result, you can kind of be fairly similar to the role of a vanguard, even if they have certain other abilities. So, it's not like this is particularly unusual. If you were to look at, say, a man-at-arms with a shield versus a knight with a shield and one-hander, fairly similar roles. One's more heavily armored, one has the dodge ability, one doesn't. You know, you're still going to be playing a fairly similar style of fighting. It's just going to be differentiated by how you move and how you mitigate the damage as one class versus how you do it with the other. Off comes the head. Thankfully, that still works out pretty well. That said, what I'm noticing already is that it's certainly a way more colorful game. It's definitely not as dreary as some of the levels in Chivalry, for instance, so it's nice to have that little bit of variety. I do like Chivalry a lot, and I like the sort of dark medieval fantasy feel that's going on with it, but it is nice to be able to exchange castle walls and murky villages for something like an Asian-themed garden or a Roman or Spartan kind of theme to the actual level. I think that's particularly positive. I think that's something that people will dig an awful lot. I am intrigued to see how they pull off the game modes, because honestly, unless you do something as compelling as the multi-objective mode from Chivalry, then I think you're kind of missing the point, because that was one of the real strengths of the game. That, and of course, the fact that the melee combat is fantastic, don't get me wrong. Aiming with a bow as the samurai does seem a little bit more difficult, I've got to say, in this particular title. But what I did notice is that everything seems just a little bit faster, and I did confirm this with the devs. I asked, hey, you know, have you sped the game up to some degree? And the answer was yes. They did speed the game up slightly. That was kind of their aim with it. They wanted Chivalry to be a little bit more slow and deliberate. They wanted Chivalry Deadliest Warrior to be a little bit quicker, a little bit more arcadey to some degree, while still maintaining the nuance and finesse of the melee combat system, but throwing a couple of weird curveballs at you for good measure. The idea of the Spartans fighting style, the idea of the quick draw and the samurai, and so on and so forth. I'm intrigued to see where they go with the knight. They'll probably make him the most heavily armored class. That's the thing that makes the most sense to me as far as I'm concerned. They may potentially give him access to something very advanced, like a crossbow, for instance, although we still, of course, don't know what the other two classes can be. I mean, I would expect maybe a Roman Legionnaire, that's a possibility, but it seems like there'd be maybe a little bit too much overlap there. Something really cool, like a curveball like a pirate, would be very interesting, I feel. Obviously, no use of shields, no heavy armor, but a fairly light class, and also the ability to use a gunpowder weapon would really shake things up as far as I am concerned. Let's get back to the Spartan. Let's try him out just a little bit. I do feel the Spartan's fighting style takes a little bit more getting used to here. It's mostly because it's almost all spear-based. You can use a sword, but they're fairly short-ranged. The stabbing motion over the shield there seems to be the most effective way of doing things. And since it is a large round shield, you're going to be able to deflect quite a bit. But as a result of it being a large round shield, it means that it's not as high as a shield would be, say, on another class from Chivalry. So there are more areas you can be damaged in, and you actually die surprisingly fast as a Spartan. I guess the bronze armor not all that effective. So I guess the question is, should you actually be looking forward to this? In its pre-alpha state right now, it does feel like a slightly faster Chivalry with a little bit more variety in combat style. You can do cool stuff like that, which I very much enjoy. Thematically, it's already very strong. And if they are able to actually keep that going with a variety of fighting styles and weapons, as opposed to just kind of reskinning Chivalry, then I think they will be in a good spot. What helps is the fact there's a lot of custom animations here. You notice that with the bow drawing, for instance, the drawing of the samurai sword, the over the head, as well as the shield bash attacks available for the Spartan there. So there's definitely a lot of custom work going in there, which I very much appreciate. And it is enjoyable. It's as enjoyable as Chivalry, arguably slightly more so, just because of the general hectic nature of the actual combat. It's just a little bit faster, a little bit more arcadey. You have a couple of different options available to you. And once they get all 5 factions in, it could be very, very interesting indeed. I'm just concerned as to whether or not the actual game modes will be any good. It's not an expansion that really addresses concerns about Chivalry, because Chivalry is a pretty good game anyway, and I think that as it stands, Chivalry is a solid title. It delivers exactly what it promises in that respect. They did manage to introduce a few bugs lately, I've got to admit, but let's be frank here, there are also going to be people relentlessly complaining about balance and features that they believe should be in the game, but weren't in there at launch, but were never promised in the first place, and will believe a game is, quite frankly, never finished, regardless of the fact that they've had a couple of 100 hours of worth out of their $25 investment there. But this is solid, yeah? From what I'm seeing, it looks like this is going to be a nice little spin. It's a nice little companion to Chivalry. For those of us that enjoyed Chivalry and want a slightly different experience, you are going to get that option with Chivalry Deadliest Warrior. The $15 price point is pretty attractive as far as I'm concerned. That seems to work out fairly well. I guess I'm just interested to see where the support will then lie. Will there be any more support for Chivalry Medieval Warfare? Do they have any intention of doing that? Will they actually end up splitting the community with this? I mean, arguably they could get more people into Chivalry as a result of even just the brand recognition here. So that's kind of the strength of making a Deadliest Warrior title, is that it's more recognizable to people. The flip side of that is that if a lot of the Chivalry guys move over to Deadliest Warrior, then the servers are going to be less full and the community is kind of going to be split right down the middle. It's not a map pack, as it were. It is an expansion with a lot of content, a lot of different classes, but you still do end up having kind of the same effect. The question, I suppose, would be, would, say, a Chivalry owner be able to play the Knight class in this game for free? That probably makes the most sense. If you don't want to split the community, admittedly, it does mean there's going to be a hell of a lot of Knights, potentially, but I can see there being a way of doing it in a fair manner, just allowing guys who own Chivalry to kind of dip into Deadliest Warrior with one class, so the community isn't just so fractured by the release of a title along these lines. Regardless, though, it's looking fun. It's a lot of fun to play. There's a decent amount of variety in fighting styles even before we see the other classes. So, I mean, aside from the Knight, who I'm not particularly thrilled about, I'm intrigued to see what the other 2 classes are actually going to end up being. It's looking pretty promising, folks. Chivalry Deadliest Warrior. This is pre-alpha footage that I recorded at PAX, which is why I'm dying so much. Thank you very much for watching. My apologies for a lack of sound. That was simply the nature of this alpha build right now. Looking forward to covering this as it moves further into development. Please watch the rest of my pack stuff. You can see a bit of it at the end of this video, and you'll be able to very easily find it on my channel. Just look for packs or interview, and you will find the content there. Thanks for watching, folks. I'll see you next time.